Carlos Santana made a request that confused everyone around him. His manager couldn't believe what he'd heard. Carlos had never asked for anything like this. What was he going to do with empty seats at a concert? They had 24 hours. That night, even JimmyPage would watch from backstage in disbelief. And when Carlos began playing Europa, a man in the audience would have the shock of his life, and nothing would ever be the same for him again. May 11th, 2007. Friday, San Rafael, California. Carlos Santana's house in San Rafael sat on a quiet side street. To the right, past a narrow gap, stood a single-story house with a kitchen window facing his garage door. Gloria Bennett was 85 and appeared at that window every morning at 6:05, coffee in hand, always the same green mug, hair slightly tousled by the morning air. Their first meeting was ordinary. Carlos was taking out his trash when he felt someone watching, turned, and a woman in the window waved at him, laughing. He waved back. Sadly, that kind of neighborliness barely exists anymore. But Gloria knew exactly who her neighbor was. She'd lived long enough to recognize Carlos Santana. She never let on. One morning, while Carlos was loading a guitar case into his car, Gloria called from the window. "You leave somewhere every day, music man. Is it a tour?" The corner of Carlos's mouth lifted. "Something like that. And you're at that window every day. Doesn't it get hard staying up this early?" Gloria's answer stuck with him. "I already slept for 85 years. Being awake feels better now." Days passed, and the morning greetings became a ritual. Carlos would sometimes stop and talk. He learned Gloria had lost her husband 12 years ago. She lived with her son David and his wife Diane. Evenings, she'd sit in the porch swing and watch the street. Gloria never treated him like a fan, never asked for an autograph or a photo. She called him Music Man, and that name carried a warmth like store-bought coffee. Plain, but enough. Carlos called her Morning Sunshine. Then, the last week of March, the window was closed. Curtain drawn. Next morning, same thing. Carlos wouldn't admit it even to himself, but every morning when he stepped out of the garage, his eyes drifted to those closed curtains. And the woman's absence left something missing in the rest of his day. 2 weeks later, Carlos was getting out of his car when David came through the side door. Shoulders slumped forward, dark circles under his eyes, trash bag in hand. Carlos walked over. "Hello, David. I'm Carlos, your neighbor. I haven't seen your mother at the window. Is everything all right?" David looked up. He knew who was standing there. His mother had talked about Music Man for years. "My mom mentioned you a lot, Mr. Santana." He paused, pressed his palm to the back of his neck. "She doesn't live here anymore. Diane, my wife, spent 6 months looking for work. Couldn't even get a proper interview. Mom's care fell entirely on her while I worked 7 to 7. Diane burned out. We had to place her at Marin Elder Care." David looked away when he said, "Had to?" "She didn't want to go. She begged, but we had no choice." Carlos didn't comment. "How was she there?" was all he said. David shrugged, hands into his pockets, out, back in. "I visit every week, but she barely talks. Found herself a window, though. Spends the whole day there. Even telling this story ties a knot in your throat." That night, Carlos stood in his garage looking at the shelves on the wall. Awards, tour memorabilia. In the bottom corner sat an old pick case, its lid not quite closing. Carlos had played for hundreds of thousands of people over 40 years, but what kept him up that night wasn't the thrill of a concert. It was an empty window. The following Tuesday, Carlos walked through the doors of Marin Elder Care. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and old fabric. Wear marks on the plastic visitor chairs were the first thing you noticed. Gloria's door was open. She'd sunk into the chair by the window, staring outside. "Morning sunshine," Carlos said from the doorway. Gloria turned slowly, her eyes, or rather, the ache behind them. She needed a few seconds. Then her lips parted. "Music Man." Her voice was thin. Carlos sat in the chair across from her. They talked for 10 minutes. During that time, Gloria looked out the window again and again, each time the same pause, a few seconds of stillness. The fifth time, Carlos asked, "What are you looking for out there?" Gloria didn't answer. She stood and moved to the other side of the room, and what she said would change the course of everything. "You have a song," Gloria said. Her voice had softened. "Europa. When David was small, I'd play it on the tape deck every Sunday morning. Every time he'd close his eyes and sit perfectly still, a 7-year-old boy not moving a muscle." Gloria's fingers found the edge of the blanket on her lap. The screen door would still be shut at that hour. Morning fog hadn't lifted. Last night's apple pie tin sitting on the counter. I'd put the cassette in. That click. The tape would start turning, and we'd both hold our breath until the first note came. David would sit on the carpet in his pajamas, bare feet, hair falling to one side. Neither of us said a word until the song ended. She looked out the window, the sixth time. Then he'd turn to me. "One more time, Mom," and I'd rewind the tape. That whirring sound, even that was beautiful. Gloria paused, and this time she looked not at the window but straight at Carlos. "I wanted to tell you this before I reached the end of the road, music man, because you gave my boy and me the most beautiful Sunday mornings." She hadn't told him by accident. She'd told the man who came looking for her, deliberately, what his own song had meant. Carlos sat still for a few seconds, then stood and touched Gloria's hand. "I'll come again soon, morning sunshine," he said. Walking back down the corridor, he noticed something. On the wall across from a bed, a yellowed poster held up with tape at the corners. Led Zeppelin, 1975 tour. JimmyPage on stage with his double-neck guitar. The small, white-haired woman in the bed caught Carlos looking. 40 years. That poster's been with me," she said. "My husband hated it. Means the world to me." A small smile. "Ruth." Carlos smiled back and kept walking. An idea had formed in his mind. A nurse caught him at the end of the hallway. "Gloria closes up a little more each week," she said, voice low. "But don't worry, they all start like this. After a while, there's no coming back. You know how it is." He got in his car, gripped the leather of the steering wheel. Gloria's voice was still in his ears. "You gave my boy and me the most beautiful Sunday mornings." And in another room, another woman holding on to life through a 40-year-old poster, both of them fading like flowers without water. Carlos pulled out his phone and called Ramon. "I need something for the Sweetwater show. Clear the entire first row, 15 seats. Send invitations to the nursing homes in the Moraine area. Any resident who wants to come, free. We cover everything. Add Europa to the end of the set list." Silence on the other end. "You sure? You haven't played Europa in a long time, Carlos." "I know. This time I will. And get me Jimmy's number." "JimmyPage?" "Yes." Ramon didn't stay quiet this time. "What's going on, Carlos?" Carlos had already hung up. Time was short, and he had 48 hours. That evening, Carlos called JimmyPage. They'd known each other since the 70s. "Jimmy, I'm playing Sweetwater Friday night. There's a woman at the nursing home I visited. A 40-year-old poster of yours on her wall. Never took it down." "I'll be there Friday," Page said. 2 days before the concert, Carlos slipped an envelope into David's mailbox. 2 tickets and a short note. "David, I'm playing Sweetwater this Friday. I'd be very happy if you and your wife could come. Carlos." David opened the envelope and frowned. Diane was at the kitchen table scrolling job listings. "Carlos invited us to a concert," David said. Diane didn't look up. "Who?" "Our neighbor. The one Mom calls Music Man. Carlos Santana." Diane shrugged. "I can't give up my Friday evening for that, David." David said nothing. He stuck the tickets to the fridge with a magnet. Friday morning, Diane took them off the fridge and slipped them into her purse. David saw. He didn't say a word. Friday evening, 8:15. They walked through the doors of Sweetwater. 35 years old, stage boards darkened with age, elbows worn into the bar, 90 seats, everyone filled. The first row was different. Closest to the stage sat a group of white-haired people, some in wheelchairs, one with a folded blanket in her lap. David noticed them, but his eyes were on the stage. Like everyone else, he didn't know his own mother was among them. On the other side, backstage, JimmyPage leaned against the wall, waiting. Carlos slipped the guitar strap over his shoulder and turned to Page. First row, fourth seat from the right. Ruth, the poster. Page nodded. Carlos walked on stage. Lights went out. The room sank into darkness. Then a spot hit and Carlos appeared, white suit glowing under it. He leaned down to a white-haired woman in the first row and whispered something. She laughed. David heard the laugh, familiar, but before he could place it, the music started. 3 songs. David locked onto the stage. Diane kept checking her phone. After the third song, Carlos stepped to the mic. "We have one more," he said. The room's murmur died. "I haven't played this song in a long time. There's a special reason I'm playing it tonight. You'll understand soon." His eyes closed. He struck the first note, and David's face changed. Shoulders dropped, breathing slowed. He knew. Europa. This song was different for him, and now he was hearing it from Carlos's own hands. As the seconds passed, the sound reached into every corner of the room. At the second minute, that long, warm note rose from the strings, the one that softens something inside you just remembering it. David's mind left the room. Sunday mornings, the fog outside the kitchen window, the apple pie tin on the counter, his mother's back as she stood at the sink. The click of the cassette, the tape beginning to turn. He was 7. Pajamas, bare feet on the carpet, the rough wool scratching his knees. He didn't care. He never moved until the last note faded. Then he'd turn. "One more time, Mom?" His eyes filled. Tears slid down his face. Diane leaned in, frowning. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" she whispered. David swallowed hard. His voice shook. "This song, it reminds me of my mom. We used to listen to it every Sunday morning. I wish she were here right now." Carlos played the final note and opened his eyes. The room erupted, applause shaking the walls. Carlos raised his hand and instant silence fell. Everyone waited. He stepped to the mic. "There's a special reason I played Europa tonight," he said. "I want to tell you about someone. She's 85. She used to watch me from her window every morning. Smile, wave. We barely knew each other, but that quiet respect made my whole day better." David's heart began hammering. "Then one morning the window was empty. I found her, visited her. She told me that she and her son used to listen to Europa every Sunday morning. And every time the song ended, her boy would say the same thing." David's hands began to shake. Diane gripped his arm. Carlos said the words, "One more time, Mom." "The woman who gave me a reason to play Europa again after all these years is here tonight. Her name is Gloria." He turned toward the first row. In one of the seats closest to the stage, a white-haired woman rose, slowly. She lifted her head, faced the room, a child's excitement on her face, eyes squinting against the light. That was the moment David saw his mother. The world stopped. His legs gave out. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might break through his chest. He was out of his chair and at the front before he knew how he'd gotten there, dropping to his knees at her feet. All he could say was, "Mom." Nothing else came. Gloria, after everything, stroked her son's head, held his face in both hands, and pulled him close. On stage, Carlos stepped back into the shadows and called out, "Jimmy?" JimmyPage emerged from the darkness, white hair falling to his shoulders, standing at the very edge of the spotlight. First, the room went dead silent. No one understood. Then a murmur began to build. In the fourth seat from the right, Ruth brought her hands to her mouth. Page stepped off the stage and walked straight to her. He leaned in and took the old woman's hands in his. Ruth's eyes shone. Maybe the first time in years her face carried that kind of smile. Page bent his head and whispered, "You look wonderful." Here's the thing. Page never touched his guitar that night, didn't play a single note. But years later, when Carlos talked about that evening, he'd call it the greatest performance I ever saw. Carlos set his guitar on the edge of the stage and slipped away without a word. The moment no longer had anything to do with him. Somewhere in the second row, Diane sat frozen, hands in her lap, phone in her pocket. No expression on her face, no defense. Just a woman feeling the full weight of what she'd done for the first time. She knew that after tonight, nothing would be the same. 4 days after the concert, Diane's phone rang. An events company in Marin County calling for an interview. She started the following Monday. David had a feeling he knew who was behind it. He didn't say a word. With the first paycheck, they hired a caregiver for Gloria 3 days a week. One evening at dinner, David said, "Let's bring Mom home." Diane didn't lift her head from her plate. "Okay," she said, just the one word. 2 syllables that seemed to carry the weight of 6 months. The day Gloria came home, Diane was waiting at the door. On the kitchen counter sat the old green mug. David had pulled it down from the top shelf. Diane stepped forward and whispered, "I'm sorry." Only 2 words. She knew they weren't enough. Gloria took Diane's hand, squeezed it gently, and nodded. A nod that said she understood everything. Next morning, 6:05. Gloria made her way to the kitchen window, slow and steady, green mug in hand, black coffee, no milk. Carlos stepped out of the garage, looked up out of habit. Gloria was right there. He raised his hand. She answered with a quiet smile. Sometimes you don't know what someone means to you until their window goes dark. Today we didn't set out to tell Carlos's story. We wanted to tell Gloria's. We'd love to hear yours. Share it in the comments. In a moment, we'll say goodbye with one of Carlos Santana's own words. We make these videos to carry what lives inside Carlos Santana's heart to the next generation. Subscribe and leave a like if you'd like to support us. Let's close with something Carlos Santana once said, something worth remembering. There is no soul that love cannot heal, no heart it cannot save.